Hello, you're listening to Ending Physician Overwhelm, and I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a physician and a life coach for physicians and other professionals. In this podcast, we look at why, as physicians, we often get stuck in feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, and burnout, and how we can break out of toxic thought patterns. My hope is that each episode gives you an opportunity to heal and get more clear on how you want to show up in your life and your work. And now, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to episode 10, Belonging to Yourself. I'm going to start today's episode by reading an excerpt from Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. And I'm going to read the section where she defines her meaning for belonging. So, belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So I was reading this chapter in Gifts of Imperfection recently, getting ready for a course I'm going to be teaching. And it really struck me as she talked about belonging and fitting in and how that affects us as physicians. So part of the pain that many of the doctors that I talk to feel is they feel invisible, to themselves and to people around them. They feel like they as a human being don't exist except to take care of others, serve the needs of others, answer the questions that people have, and work and work and work. And this often shows up in multiple places in their life. It shows up at their place of work. It shows up, in their family and even in themselves, feeling that they don't really belong to themselves and they struggle with self-acceptance because of the way we have been trained to ignore our own human needs and ignore our emotions. And we can get away with this for a long time. Fitting in was necessary, literally, as you went through medical school and residency. We needed to imagine ourselves and, shape ourselves into these young doctors going through this training, showing up in a certain way and learning the art and science of medicine. And most of us got really, really good at that whole fitting in notion. And we can go along with that for a long time, where we can continue to ignore our needs in order to be liked by our colleagues and our staff. We can continue to hide our emotions so that we, appear to be these, sort of needless, emotionally impartial, care providers. And we can show up that way for a long time. But the more we do that, and the more that we do that in multiple places in our lives, it eats into ourself. It eats into our sense of ourself. And many of us find ourselves in this place where we can feel completely lost to ourselves, right? We can't identify our emotions. If someone asks, what would you like to do? Apart from, maybe eat or sleep or veg out on the couch, you may not be able to come up with an idea of what would you actually enjoy doing, right? We often find ourselves, sort of asking ourselves the question, how much can I endure? How much can I tolerate? and not questions like, how good will I allow myself to have it? How will I show up and be seen? Who am I deep in my core? And part of burnout, one of the key components is this sense of futility. And futility is feeling that nothing that you do matters. And it's very damaging psychologically, because you could be working as hard as you can imagine, trying to show up in all the places that you do, at work and at home, and serving other people. And you feel as though nothing that you do matters. And often the only solution you have for that problem is to try and work harder. And we all know that working harder in that instance really doesn't fix that problem. It doesn't make us feel useful or worthwhile ultimately. It just feeds into that sense of futility, that nothing that we do matters. And of course, right, we see that we lose physicians every single year to suicide and depression and these conditions where people feel truly hopeless, right? And we can't allow that to continue. But for people who are so emotionally wrapped up in the work that we do, right? Medicine is a calling for many of us. Taking care of people is a calling. It feels very core to our identity. So if we are in this place of burnout and feeling completely overwhelmed and feeling like nothing that we do matters, it's very easy to slide into that idea of I don't matter, right? And so this desire to constantly fit in, if we keep holding on to that idea that we need to keep fitting in after we're done with training, once we're out in the world as attendings, you can see how that feeds into a really toxic mindset and feeds into, that futility that is so easy to develop. So let's detach from that idea of needing to fit in and imagine what it might be like to belong to yourself, to belong in the group of people that you work with, where you show up and you get to be you and you get to be seen and heard and valued as part of the team, to belong in your family, whether that's your family of origin or family and friends that you live with, being able to show up as your authentic self. What do we need to do in order to start to belong to ourselves? Sometimes that work is as simple, and I say simple, not easy, but it's as simple as learning to tune in to our emotions, right? To get really clear on how we feel, how our thoughts contribute to our feelings, and stop walking through the world feeling numb, feeling like we aren't allowed to have emotions. And sometimes this is work that we can do on our own as individuals. Sometimes it might be sitting down with a journal and just starting to write what is in your mind and your heart, and really kind of connecting to those parts of yourself again. And sometimes it takes help. And that help might be a therapist, it might be a coach, it might be, a close and trusted friend or a mentor. But being able to sit down with another human being who is able to see you, able to hear you, who is not trying to fix you, but just to be there as someone who is in your corner, who is supporting you, who can encourage you to show up and to be yourself and give you a safe space to do that. Again, I say that this is simple, and it's the kind of thing that can seem too simple to be effective, but it really does work. And I'll reiterate that simple doesn't mean easy, right? Simple is meaning that we don't have a lot of complicated steps. It doesn't take a lot of, reading or training or preparation. to be able to do this. But it does take the hard work of sitting with yourself, of trying to name the emotions, of perhaps letting the thoughts that run in the background of your mind come out, either in spoken word or out on the journal page, to do something to be able to really tune in with that part of the mind that is creating the emotions that you have and producing the experience that you have in your life. That work is quite powerful. And if we aren't able to do that, then we aren't able to really get to know ourselves as adults in this stage in our life. And we aren't able to really claim that belonging to ourselves, let alone to be able to show up as our authentic selves in front of others. I know that this is kind of a deep topic, but I really want to highlight the importance of being connected to yourself. When we think about how many physicians feel disconnected, feel undervalued, feel invisible in their own lives, this is the kind of work that really connects us back to our human selves and really allows us to move forward and heal from burnout. I wish that it was as easy as your employer handing you a month worth of vacation time and saying, okay, you're feeling burned out, here you go take some time off, and that you would simply take that time off and feel better. But that's unfortunately just not the way that this works. We really have to reconnect with those parts of ourselves. We really have to dig in and start to identify, who am I as a person in this stage in my life, whether you have just completed your residency, whether you're in the middle of your career, whether you're towards the end, whether you're happy in the place that you work, or you're really struggling, whether you're considering leaving medicine or happy to stay. Knowing who you are, being able to have your human emotions, being able to take care of your human needs, right? Being able to accept yourself as the imperfect and completely lovable and worthy human being that you are is so necessary in order to be whole and wholehearted as a person. And so take the steps of starting small. And if you need help, reach out and get help. This is one part of the work that I do with physicians, helping them to reconnect with these parts of themselves. And I'll tell you, it's such a powerful experience to be a part of, to be able to hold space for another human being and let them show up and be seen by another adult, by a fellow physician, for sometimes what feels like the first time in many, many years. It's quite profound, and it's work that I love doing. And so if you feel like you're struggling, feel free to reach out and connect, and let's find a time to talk. The other thing I want to mention here before we finish up this episode is that I will be leading a small group for physicians only through the work of The Gifts of Imperfection, again by Brené Brown. If you've not read the book, what she walks through is simple guidelines that help us to recultivate our authentic self, get in touch with our creativity, get in touch with our self-kindness, and along the way, letting go of the hustle for worthiness, letting go of scarcity, letting go of the need to compare ourselves to other people. So if you have any interest in walking through this excellent book and this wonderful work with me, please feel free to check out my website at www.healthierforgood.com/upcoming events, and there will be a link in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode, Belonging to Yourself. I hope that you have picked up some valuable insights, and I hope that this really starts to create movement in you to be more connected to yourself, to be more whole, to feel like you belong in your life to yourself first, above all else. Thanks for joining me, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Ending Physician Overwhelm. If you've learned something today or felt moved, please share this episode with a colleague, and be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode yourself. If you'd like to know more about me and my coaching practice, you can find more information at www.healthierforgood.com. Until next time, take care.